Welcome to Season 2 of the PPC Ponderings podcast. In this season, we're platforming people we don't personally know well, but who do know PPC well. Kirk is a big fan of making new friends, so look at these episodes as friendly chats between two new friends learning about PPC together. Today we join Kirk as he has a conversation with the Chief Everything Officer of Teabeeshell Media, Travis Biechele. Kirk and Travis chat about some high-level PPC tactics, PMAX and Discovery Campaigns. Now, we know that Google has recently announced the end of Discovery Campaigns, but we still thought there was some great information in this episode that you can bring over to the newly announced Demand Gen campaigns. So go ahead and sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy our conversation with Travis.
Cool. Travis, thank you so much. It is great to meet you. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, absolutely excited to be here.
Yeah, and where are you coming from? Where are you joining us from?
From Newport Beach, California, so down in Orange County.
Okay. I'm getting to know California a little bit better now that I've been there a few times. I don't think I've ever been to Northern California. Now that I think of it, always more. Yeah. San Francisco is probably the furthest north I've been.
It's almost like two states, and we Californians get in a way territorial about which is better, Northern California or Southern California. But I'm partial, being born and raised here, but it's a beautiful place to be.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the few times I've been there, like every time you go to California, you're like, oh, this is why there are so many people here, because it's just like the weather's perfect. Everything is beautiful. Yeah, it's right on the beach. You basically almost any what would it be, like not geographical location, whatever the term would be, that is represented in the United States, mountains, desert, ocean, like that's all in California. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I have a newer bucket list item, which would be to snowboard, hike, and surf in the same day, which it's rare in the US places that you can do that, but I'd love to accomplish that.
That's awesome. That is a really cool bucket list item. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh. So speaking of hobbies, fun, that sort of thing, those things sound like they're what you know how to do. Do you snowboard and surf?
Yeah, I try to get to the mountains at least once or twice a season in the winter. Mammoth Mountain is about 5-6 hours north, and that's pretty stellar. And then surfing, I'm about a mile or so from the beach. So I try to get out on the water when I can. And if nothing else, just getting my feet on the sand and in the water is therapeutic in its own. But yeah, taking advantage of the weather here, I'm a pretty avid herb gardener, and I've got house plants all over. So, keep myself busy in the sun as much as I can.
I love it. See, that sounds like my type of garden. Like I want to be able to eat from it.
Yeah.
I have a friend who he calls it a cheeseburger garden. And he's like, my wife and we started doing a garden during COVID. And like that next year, they're like, we had so much like squash and zucchini, and we don't really like squash and zucchini. And so they're like, let's just make stuff, because they're like, what do we like? We like cheeseburgers. Like, let's just grow stuff for cheeseburgers. So they have I think they do cucumbers for pickles and tomatoes and onions and lettuce and, so.
Yeah, I love that. Mine's a little bit more of like a cocktail garden where I've got a lot of garnishes and herbs, but, makes for good DIY cocktails at home.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really cool. Awesome. Okay. So then how'd you get into PPC?
I've been in advertising for over a decade now. I started out on the agency side and was just really attracted to the kind of feedback loop that search advertising offers. It's one of the rare types of digital advertising where you put something forth and you can kind of get an immediate response by way of people's search queries based on the keywords that you put forth. So I was involved with Google Ads when it was AdWords and before there were even conversions to speak of. So it's certainly evolved quite a bit over the years, but that's been kind of my favorite, where I've developed the most skill is around Google Ads over the years. And then kind of took myself I lived in the Midwest for a number of years, and that's kind of where I spent my agency time before kind of coming back west home and kind of going on the solopreneur route.
Very cool. And I have some questions around, various things that, we had chatted about briefly in like our, our questionnaire and stuff, but now I'm really curious. So let me kind of float something by you. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are and response are, because this is a not finalized concept. So I am wondering increasingly if like conversion tracking within paid search, like let's say moving from marketing, so marketing, especially with paid search advertising, became like click based. And so that was such a big thing because you were identifying your target audience as much as you could, right? And then like bringing about engagement with the information that you as the marketer could control with that audience and the creative or whatever it would be, the ad text for paid search. And then like in some ways, like you successfully did your job. And then all of a sudden conversions entered that. And all of us like conversions, all of us run after that. We know like performance because blah, blah, blah. Like it doesn't matter who engages if they don't actually purchase. So like obviously the purchase is the final objective, but like I'm wondering if for the overall like philosophical benefit of the industry, if that's actually not been good for PPC, because like so much goes into actually landing a sale, so much more than just like the PPC ad and keyword, that I'm almost wondering if it's actually put like if it's almost been unhealthy for the industry by pulling the focus and exposure off of what we can control and do well, which would be actual marketing, advertising. I don't know what I think about that because obviously performance is important. What do you think about that concept as a whole?
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. And I think a lot about the days before the advent of internet advertising, when you were tied to TV, radio, and outdoor effectively. And in those days, you were a price taker and you had no choice that if you wanted to promote your business within that inventory, those entities set the price and you could either afford to participate or not. And with the internet and advertising therein, it kind of democratized how we advertise. And within that, it became intrinsically more measurable. You didn't have to rely on consumer surveys and, like you did in the days of old, and you got that instant feedback loop. And that was really exciting for a lot of folks. And we've kind of coached ourselves into that really tight feedback loop of provability. And so it's become like the default norm and expectation. And I think over the last couple years, kind of with Apple leading the way with certain privacy updates, a lot of that ability to track with absolute confidence has been stripped away or it's eroding. And so it's kind of become a responsibility of advertisers to figure out a way to still attract the right people and measure within the bounds that we can. And that might look a little bit different than conversions in the strictest sense, and being able to stitch together with absolute confidence, this person, this click led to this sale. So we're going to have to get creative with that. And I think that GA4 is quite possibly a decent tool if we can all learn to adopt it. But, there's going to have to be some creativity in how we look at performance looking ahead.
And I've always been of the mindset that attribution is complex and there are certain aspects about it that are just unsolvable. You can take a customer journey and like one of the things that I just think, I don't feel like I hear a lot of people talk about this, which might mean that it's because it's a dumb idea, or it might mean like that more people should be aware of this. And that's just the concept of even like what happens emotionally in a customer throughout the stages of the journey, especially, is like totally untrackable. I mean, maybe in the future they run like various tests as different tech comes out to measure emotions and heart rate and things like that. I don't know, like kind of like they've done eye tracking software, things like that. That could be kind of interesting.
Right.
But even then, you have someone who hits your business 15 times through a variety of different channels, and like exactly like you said, especially with Facebook going out. Rand Fishkin just released something on SparkToro about dark social traffic, and just showing how much dark social traffic there is at this point nowadays, which gets reported direct, in analytics, and just that idea of across those 15 touch points, even if you can calculate the percentage of these 1,000 people, like 45% of them converted on the third, like converted on Instagram ads, things like that. So that gives us XYZ percentage, like kind of, but also, how many of us have seen something that really resonated with us, but we weren't ready to click and purchase, or we just weren't able to, and then later we come back and purchase, or maybe even it takes us a little longer, but it was like that point in the journey that emotionally for us, like we connected, and that's totally untracked. Right. And I think that's just
Right.
where that's, I think that's exactly to your point too, that you're saying, even like the pre-tracking days. I'm wondering if sometimes we've almost done more harm to the industry by making it look like everything can be tracked, because then all this focus is on like really obsessing over tracking to performance, when sometimes the best thing you can do for a client, and we've done this, is basically say, when they're asking about certain campaigns or whatever, like say at the end of the day, like, gosh, we're looking at our targeting. You can see with search terms, you can see, XYZ, we can bring all this stuff and say, our targeting is dialed into people who are literally asking at a reasonable CPC. They're literally asking for what you're selling. If you're not able to sell to them, that I just no longer think that's a marketing problem. And that might be, now it's time to look at the offer, time to look at all that other stuff, right? But in that sense, like Google Ads has not failed. It could be a beneficial window into what should be solved, which maybe is the offer or the price or things like that. So I don't know.
Right. And I think that while we have it at our disposal, and while Google provides query level data to us, at least for search-based campaigns, we have a data set that no other platform volunteers. And that's really powerful. When you spend across any other social platform or audio platform, you can see great performance, but you don't really have a ton of information that's voluntarily passed back to you as an advertiser, the same way that you have with search-based Google Ads. And, fingers crossed that never fully goes away. But, in the meantime, it's research and advertising kind of rolled into one, which I think is truly unique in the space. And I do agree that if you have a high degree of confidence based on what you're bidding on from a keyword perspective and the makeup and majority of your search query report, then you can make conclusions about the quality of the traffic that you're bringing. And if you are seeing that conversion rate is low, then absolutely you need to look at the creative, the design on your destination, your landing page, your website. There's a lot of CRO techniques that can be employed, and it might also be the offer, but there's a lot of things that become the onus of the company or the brand to shoulder as well, if you have that assurance that the quality of traffic is high.
Yeah. Good stuff. Let's completely switch gears. Discovery. I want to talk discovery a bit. You've noted, I think you use the term, I'm bullish on discovery ads. And you talked about them pretty positively. Like, tell us a little bit about discovery ads, and if you wouldn't mind, even define it for people
Sure.
who are listening who are new to PPC. You just tell us a little bit about what discovery ads are, what you like about them, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So discovery, I think, is an often overlooked campaign type within Google Ads. And when first released, it was largely confined to discover feeds on Android devices. So it very much looks and feels like a social feed. It's scrollable, it updates daily, and it's a mix of news sources based on your interests, articles, and of course, ads. And more recently, the inventory makeup of a discovery campaign has included discovery feeds, but also YouTube inventory, Gmail placements. So it's kind of branched out in that respect. But what I think is really attractive about it, especially with most of the ads being served to mobile and predominantly to Android devices, is anybody that has an Android like me, you're signed into your Google account. So from an identity perspective, with privacy respected, you're able with a fairly high degree of confidence reach the people that you are wanting to reach. So when I first started using it, it was predominantly in a retargeting fashion. And I also liked it because of its intrinsic viewability. If you're looking at something that's a scrollable feed like social, viewability, whether your ad is actually seen on the page is no longer an issue. So I really like that was a problem that I saw in the display ad space that had been solved for with this ad format. You pair that with the kind of identity matching, and it becomes really powerful. And I think it's something that's often slept on. And more recently, I've started to push clients to start adopting it as a top of funnel strategy. So your targeting certainly changes. It's no longer just retargeting like I first started using it. Now it is a prospecting tool. And you do have a little more confidence than with, some YouTube campaigns or certainly display campaigns and to an extent Performance Max, because you are confined within either Gmail or YouTube or Discover feeds, all of which have solved for that viewability problem that's kind of plagued advertisers for a long time.
It's interesting. I don't know if I've ever really thought deeply about discovery campaigns until now. So this is great because I've heard people describe PMAX as like the social media ad of Google, and I kind of disagree with that in some ways, because to me PMAX, and I'm getting to discovery, to me PMAX, there's too many flippin' placements to be like possible inventory placements to be like a 1-to-1 comparison to social. Like definitely it's audience targeting and you have creative assets, video and images and stuff for sure. So that's more social, but like Facebook, it's like a user's feed. And it's not like,
Right.
hey, this could be literally any website on the entire internet and whatever content is on that website. And that's where your ad could show up, which is, which PMAX is eligible for. That doesn't mean it is and all that. To me, though, I think you had described Discovery as more social-like, and even as you were saying it, Discovery sounds way more like actual social in that regard, because it is attached to that user, that logged in user, and it's attached to their feed. So it's not showing on a bunch of placements. It's showing, pretty much in that place, as well as like YouTube and Gmail, as you had just noted. So gosh, that really does sound like this is most aligned with an actual social ad format in Google. Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree. It looks, feels, and functions very much like social ads do. And when you're constructing the campaigns, you're going to need to add high quality visuals. There are different types of ad formats, whether that's a left to right scrollable carousel, or if you're attaching your merchant center feed, you can make these ad units shoppable. And when you are interacting with them, it looks, and it's a native format, just like social ads are. So it looks and feels like the article content that you might encounter before or after as you're scrolling through your feed. And then when you think about how they are placed, in Gmail, we all see Gmail ads. I think a lot of them have been overlooked as we've kind of gotten blind to them. But should people engage with them, then it opens up to a full screen experience, almost like an email ad. So it's very unique in that sense. I don't see that type of format anywhere else. And it just is a higher impact placement than, yes, some display ad tucked in the corner of a site, or an obnoxious, video overlay that kind of follows you as you scroll down a page. It's very much non-intrusive in that sense.
I would assume ad fraud would tend to be lower as well by nature of that too. Interesting.
And
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's all Google owned inventory too. So you're not kind of hamstrung by display inventory where the onus is kind of on publishers to create an ad experience within the content of their site that works well for people who are exploring their content. Here, it's you've opted in to use your Discover feed, or you are using Gmail, and it's very much so like a more of a native, tucked in, less obnoxious ad format, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Um, Thinking of an account right now where I'm like, okay, I've never tested Discovery, and it's time. It's time. One thing that we have noticed, I know my team has done more than me personally with Discovery stuff, and one thing I think as we've chatted about it, we've noticed is it can seem to vary a bit in traffic. Is that what you've noticed as well in terms of like there can just be periods where there's more sales, there's more traffic, and other periods where it's not, so a little bit unstable in that regard. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have encountered that too. If you were to plot a, even something as basic as like an impressions volume graph over time, it's going to be far more variable, than something like search or shopping. And I think that's in part due to the fact that you are working with a subset of the US. It is predominantly Android users. So there's that kind of consideration when launching the campaigns. And so, usership of that feed is going to fluctuate over time. So if you can weather that, and I wouldn't ever promote this campaign format as like the go-to demand generation, but if you can weather that kind of volatility or just variability, then it can be a really healthy additional arm to try to reach new folks. And then, you can layer in a retargeting campaign from that Discover, placement and interactions that you see. So you can kind of have a multi-prong approach to reaching people in that placement specifically, assuming you tailor your messaging and your creative accordingly.
Nice. And then I know that PMAX at some point got Discovery pushed into that as well.
Yep.
It's like the monster gobbling up all the things, all the channels.
Yep.
Any thoughts on the relationship between those two? Does PMAX totally cannibalize Discovery if you're running them both? Does that look like?
There is a risk, but what I have seen in my own practice and found reinforced is that if you construct as best you can a bulletproof search campaign, a bulletproof shopping campaign, a fully robust discovery campaign, then the Performance Max campaign has to be a better quality than those in a given auction to leapfrog or cannibalize those. So to an extent, if you have really checked off all of your boxes in campaign setup and it's as fully built out as possible, it's hard for me to believe that PMAX serving would just supersede that because Google wants it to. Google has a certain, its own self-declared responsibility to remain useful for customers. So if your search ads start to get crummier because it's a cobbled together PMAX instance instead of a search campaign, people are going to stop using Google. So that's how I kind of look at it. I build out every campaign as robustly as is possible, and then trust that there will be some inevitable overlap, but that they will have their own distinct places. And what I have found is that that does push PMAX into more display inventory and YouTube inventory, and less in terms of a direct overlap with search or shopping, or in this case, discovery.
Since we're on the topic of PMAX, what's your favorite PMAX campaign setup, or any thoughts on how you like to do that?
Yeah, I think that I have kind of assembled a way that it targets predominantly new customers, and that's I think a big hurdle for a lot of folks to even adopt it, is that out of the box, if you aren't careful, PMAX can be something to the tune of 70 to 80% remarketing, which is alarming for folks once they kind of realize that or hear that. But there is an option to bid only on new customers. So if you're giving Google the right signals of existing customers, whether you've imported a custom list or you're linked up with your email provider and sending feeds directly on a daily basis. Google will know that. And if you have that setting on your PMAX to only bid for new customers, you are kind of forcing Google to serve to a truly cold, new, demand generation type of audience. So that's, I think, a big thing. Another, element of setup is, add all assets that you possibly can. Make sure that your headlines are the best ones that you have found in search campaigns. Fill out every single one of them. Add all 5 videos from your own YouTube channel so that PMAX doesn't cobble together its own, slideshow style video from the visual assets that you provide. Always have high quality visuals that you add. And if possible, create asset groups for different products that you're selling or different product tiers, so that it's not all, you're not just uploading your Merchant Center feed and any ad can assemble with any headline. If you group them together thematically, kind of like the ad group, style structure, those are kind of some highlights that I weave into mine.
Yeah, cool. Love it. I think we think very similarly on it. So yeah, definitely there's a lot to consider and test with PMAX. We're digging into some of the same new customer acquisition things as well. I know, that's on a lot of people's minds, exactly what you said in the beginning of just, and I like that people are becoming wiser to the fact that PMAX isn't really a win if it's just better at stealing traffic that would have come and converted elsewhere. And that doesn't even mean PMAX is bad. That's just like, let's not call it a win if it's not, but then how can we actually have it go after and like bring in new customers? And that's what a lot of like brands and a lot of people that I talk to, that's definitely what they care about. And for them, it's all about like driving new customers and doing that profitably. And so if PMAX can continue to help them with that, they're gonna be happy with that. And if we can manage PMAX to do that, they're gonna be happy with us. So cool. Alrighty. Agreed. Well, we should probably wrap it up there. Fantastic. Just kind of, tips about discovery, PMAX, even some ponderings on like search itself. Where can we find you online?
Yeah, I'm very active on Twitter. My handle there is Teabeeshell. That's TEABEESHELL. And, if folks are interested in reaching out, I'm also available, through my website, teabeeshell.com. So, open for discussions, DMs, working together, whatever it might be that I can be of service.
Very cool. Sounds good. Thanks, Travis. It's been a fun chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Kirk.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Stay tuned for the next episode of the PPC Ponderings podcast, Keep Learning PPC. If you are a person with a brilliant PPC tactic that the world needs to know about, please apply to be a podcast guest online at zatomarketing.com/ponderings-guest. If you are enjoying these podcasts, please make sure to leave us a review on whatever your preferred podcast provider is. But in the meantime, may the auctions be ever in your favor.